Okay, great. So Mark Herschberg, thanks a lot for joining the podcast today.
Thank you so much for having me. I appreciate it. And Hag Sameach.
Chag Sameach. So we are here at the Network Yourself to Success podcast, and we're with Mark Herschberg, who is the author of the Career Toolkit and also an MIT instructor. He built also a course about more the soft skills side of business. So why don't you give a small introduction about how you came to do that and your career in general and the book?
Sure. So I came out of MIT with a couple different degrees in physics and computer science and began as a software engineer. And as I moved up and I started hiring people, I noticed a severe shortage of what we call firm skills. Most people call them soft skills, but we like to say they're a little more concrete between hard and soft. We call them firm.
Okay.
And so I would ask people a technical question and they'd give me a technical answer. Okay, great. But then I'd ask them questions like, what makes a good leader? How do you determine who would be a good teammate? How do you build your network? And no one had answers to these questions. And I thought back to how I was just a few years before and realized I didn't have answers to these questions either. Because as wonderful as an MIT education is, or educations from all sorts of other great universities, we don't teach networking or leadership or team dynamics. And yet all of us here, these are important skills. Everyone says, build a network, it's so important. But if it's so important, why are we not teaching this? And so at MIT, just as I was discovering, I think there's something missing, MIT was starting a course on these topics. And so I reached out and said, hey, I'm really passionate about this. I want to get involved. And I helped to build that course. And I've been teaching there for the last 20 years. We've had tens of thousands of students come through our program. And then a few years ago, I started to say, it's not just our MIT students who need this. I know it's useful for others. I've seen this in the people I hire and mentor and work with. So I started writing down what I thought was just a couple notes, and it very quickly turned into a full-fledged book.
Amazing. And how long did it take to write this book? Basically, how long were the process?
Yeah, it's an interesting question. The writing itself took just a few months. Now, in fairness, it's because I've been teaching for 20 years, so I've had the content refined and organized. The actual production of the book turned out to be much harder, and going through the editing and the layout and just a whole bunch of mishigas to actually get it to print.
Great. So how did you learn these? You say you didn't learn it on MIT, but obviously you had you have a career where you learn in the corporate world, where you learned a lot of things. You've also been VP engineering. So where did you learn these skills? Just by doing, you could say, or did you also? How do you learn it?
Yeah, for me, it was a combination of approaches, and everyone is different, right? We all learn differently. Some of it was I would see someone, a more senior person, sometimes my boss, sometimes someone else, who seemed to have really good skills. And I'd look and say, what is that person doing? Why, I'm impressed. Let me break this down and let me define what are the aspects of it. And I would just kind of jot down a few notes. I did a lot of reading. I did a lot of just learning from others. We didn't have podcasts back early in my career, but go online to what I could find or go to lectures and seminars. And I started putting all these things together. And that helped expose me. And one of the things that we emphasize in our class, these are all skills you have to do. It's like learning how to swim, learning how to play golf. You can't just read a book and say, oh, I know how to play golf now. You have to actually practice and do it. And that's true for networking. It's not theoretical. But if we can just get you to shift your mindset slightly, to recognize how to think about it, it suddenly becomes much easier and it becomes a more accessible problem, and you can start to see opportunities that you didn't see before and execute on them.
Amazing. So that's true. I definitely agree that, networking in itself is not rocket science. And, in MIT, they're studying more complicated stuff, but actually doing it is where it usually get more difficult. Doing it consistently, right? Like consistently networking consistently, and all the other skills, of course. So So basically, you said that you learned it by observing, analyzing good executives, and what would you say were the things that, what was your conclusions when you analyzed, what did you see that some people were just more successful could do? And we're talking about in the high tech world, basically, right? So what is it that you saw that they could do that is like that? Is this like small nuances, or is it like something? Yeah.
It's truly small nuances. And before I get into that, I'll say I had one student, we had a networking lunch. And I remember as we got our students and said, okay, there are the adults here, there are the professionals, go network. And they'd kind of wander off a little scared. And I had one who was very fearful. And so I walked her over to someone I knew, and I did an introduction because I knew he was in a field she was interested in. And did the kind of handoff, introduced them, and sat for a minute or two and then wandered off. And by the end of this networking lunch, she was elated. She said, I don't want this to end. I'm having so much fun. And literally in just that hour, when she shifted her mindset, she became this wonderful networker who enjoyed it, whereas just an hour before she was fearful. And so what is that change? How do we think about it? There's an old Zimbabwean proverb: if you can talk, you can sing. If you can walk, you can dance. I'd add to that, if you can have a friend, you can network.
Okay.
Because networking is just about relationships. That's it. It's about building relationships with someone. And we think about networking as extroverts. They're so great and they go out and they can be in a room of 100 people and they go, oh, I love this. I'm introverted by nature. I will go, oh, wow, 100 people, that's a lot of strangers. But you don't meet 100 people at once. You meet one, or maybe two if you're in a small group. And all of us know how to form a friendship. Now, I'm not saying everyone has to be your friend, but it's about human relationships. It's about just meeting someone and getting to know them and building that relationship over time. And the secret to building relationships is just being interested in the other person. It turns out everyone in the world has something interesting about them, something they know, some experience they've done. And so when I meet people and I'm talking to them, even if at first they might seem a little boring, I think, okay, there's something about this person, something interesting, and my job is to figure out what that is. And that's how I get to know someone. And if you're doing that, that puts you on the right path to building a relationship. You're not going to form a relationship or a friendship with everyone you meet, but you're going to start talking with them. And with some people, you're going to feel a connection. You're going to enjoy the conversation. And that's going to lead to future interactions that over time build a relationship.
Okay, so that's basically, as far as I understand, that's basically the core principles of what you see. Networking is not as complicated. As the more complicated you make it, the more difficult it is. Basically back to the roots of normal relationship between people, one-on-one relationships. Now, what is the methodology that you lay out in the book? How is that, and how is that specifically related to engineers, or is it for everybody?
It's really for everyone. There's no, this is how engineers do it, this is how others do it, because it's human nature.
Yeah.
And to your point, it's funny, MIT students, they want that formula. What's the algorithm for networking? There's not one. But one of the fundamental pieces is it comes down to trust. Trust is the most crucial element of your network. And so one way I bring this home is to think about a request. So right now, if I were to ask you to borrow $10,000 or about 35,000 shekels, you'd say, hey, Mark, you seem nice, but we just met. I don't know you that well yet. And if you think about your entire network, how many people would you lend that to? There might be a handful. Literally, you can count on one hand probably how many people you'd feel comfortable giving that money to. And there's a lot you don't. Now, the people you do feel comfortable with, they're people you've probably known for years. They might be family members. They might be people you would trust very well. There might also be people you've known for years for whom you would not lend that money because you know them well enough to know not a good idea, right? And so you wouldn't lend it to someone initially because you haven't built up that trust, that relationship, but it builds up over time. Now, of course, it's not about money. We don't think about our network in terms of monetary value, but it's about what type of relationships. Someone I've met and have only known very briefly, if they say, hey, I see you have an open job for an accountant at your company. Can you pass my network, or can you pass my resume? Oh, sure. I say, hey, I met this guy, seems okay. Take a look at his resume, see if he's good. But if it's someone I've known for 20 years, I might say, hey, she is wonderful. She is solid. You really need to consider her. And now we've gone a little deeper. I pretty much guaranteed her a resume or an interview. Likewise, I have friends who run multi-billion-dollar companies. When someone says, I'd love to meet them because, they've got deep pockets, they can buy my product. There are people I've introduced to them who I've known for years who I think will be a good fit and not waste their time. But I'm not just going to introduce anyone I've met to this person who's high value in some sense. So we use that trust over time to build up how much we can derive from our network.
Exactly. So you're touching on a good point. Like, so there are, there's something also like something in the between, right? You say the ones that you never met, the ones that you know for 20 years, and then how much trust do you really need for, let's say you take that example there, when you're job searching and I see there's a position in a company, and I'm looking out and saying like, who's working in this company, and I see someone who's working that could be probably relevant. So there's something, and I actually talked to that with one of my participants today, that so it's kind of like you're reaching out to someone, now you want to be my friend when I have something, when I have this job position, why didn't you come before? There's something, in one way, there's something opportunistic about it, but the other way, that's how life is, right? I mean, you have to spread the seeds before and make the relationships before the opportunity arises. But sometimes the opportunity arises and you don't have that connection, and so how much do you need to know that guy for it to be a little bit more warm than just hey, can you pass on my CV? And I don't know you, but can you pass on my CV to something that's a little bit warmer? How would you do that?
Sure. Harvey Mackey has a book with the title, Dig Your Well Before You're Thirsty.
Okay.
Such a great line. Networking, like Rome, isn't built in a day. And I see so many people who go, oh, hi, nice to meet you. Here's my name. What's your name? Here's my card. There's your card. Okay, great. I'll call on you when I need something. And it's like this drive-by. And they come and they ask for something before they've built that relationship, before they've built that trust. And to your point, right, it's the same reason you're not going to lend me 35,000 shekels right now. We haven't built that trust. Now, I think just passing a resume is a lower bar, but it's almost a question of how you're passed. So when we look for jobs, we can, of course, apply online and a resume goes in a pile and maybe it's noticed, maybe it's not. So when someone says, I'm going to pass your resume along, right, whether it's metaphorically by email or physically walking it over, that's a signal to the hiring manager. When I've got 80 resumes, if one of my coworkers says, here's someone, okay, I guarantee I'm going to look at that resume and probably give it a little more attention than just a random one that came in. But there's still a difference between, okay, I do a quick skim because, oh, hey, here's this guy I met at some event. I skim it and I'll treat it not that much better than just the random ones that come in. But if it's someone saying, this is my friend, this is someone I know, this is someone I recommend, that resume gets much more attention. They might even get an automatic interview. I've had people where, I didn't think the resume was that strong, but this person says, hey, this is someone I know, I've worked with. Okay, they get an interview. So I think the barrier is pretty low to just getting your resume in there, but it's then a question of how much advantage do you get by how it's given, by how much authentication and validation they provide with it. But still, I think to your point, don't meet people and don't begin with, hey, can I borrow that money? Or can you pass this along to me? And one of the important things to do when networking is to always think about, how can I help you? What can I do to help you? Because then you're going to feel I'm not here just to take from you.
So that's a great point. And it gets all the time, especially Keith Ferrazzi's book, Never Eat Alone. He talks a lot about this. So a lot of my participants, or a lot of people I talk to, they say, but I don't have anything to give. I'm a junior and I'm reaching out to someone senior. What can I possibly give him? So what would you say to that?
I get this all the time with my students who say, we're just a sophomore, we don't have anything, we're junior people. That is patently untrue. Now, I would say first and foremost, you do have some value, but let's assume you feel, nope, there's nothing at all. I can't think of one thing where I am helpful in any way. You have your network. You have people you know, because part of what's valuable are the other people in your network. And everyone knows someone who will be valuable at some point. Now, first I'll mention people make a mistake thinking, oh, I'm in technology, I just need to know people in technology. Wrong way to think about it. Think about people in lots of different fields because they really expand your network in different ways. But you never know when this person might say, hey, I wish I knew some great accountant. You say, oh, you know what? I met an accountant a few months ago and we've kept in touch. Or, my wife's cousin knows a guy who's an expert on whatever this topic is. That provides value. Your network itself provides value. You mentioned Keith Ferrazzi. One of the things I love about how he thinks, I'm an engineer, so you give me a problem, I think, okay, how do I define this? How do I solve it? Keith's approach to problem solving is, who in my network knows how to solve this problem? Now, I'll share with you a story. When I was teaching these sophomores, I was doing some consulting work. I did that for a while. I was chatting with the student, and the student said, after I did a talk, I just mentioned my background briefly. Said, wow, you sound like this great problem solver. We had so many problems at the startup I was at this summer. Boy, I wish we had someone like you. I said, well, would you feel comfortable introducing me to the founder of the company? He said, oh yeah, sure. I'm still working there this fall. Does an introduction. I got a 6-month contract. I'm some guy with 10 years experience. This is a sophomore. He got me a job.
Amazing.
Our networks are valuable, and therefore you are valuable to someone.
Amazing. So that's a great tip. So even your own, so most people are probably not then aware of the power of their own network, right? I mean, and that's the question also, like, when do you go out of your network? We're talking about people who are looking for jobs, people who are not that more experienced and are starting their career. So when is the time to it's more difficult. The closer the people are, the more likely they are to help you and the more comfortable it is to actually ask them for help. But most people are not that aware about what is the power of their network. Like you say, Keith Ferrazzi says that, right? When I have a problem, I check in my network, what resources do I have there and who knows who? But how do you know that? How do you go about kind of like mapping out your own network first before you go?
Yeah, one of the reasons we don't always appreciate the power is because we have this very localized view of our network. So when I think of my MIT students and they say, well, I want a job, and they're looking at me and saying, yeah, maybe I'll hire you, but I wonder if there's anyone else. And they think, oh, wow, there's MIT students to the left of me, to the right of me. We're surrounded by MIT students. So, I'm a dime a dozen here. But in fact, right, so on campus, sure, your MIT student makes you less unique. But to the rest of the world, MIT students are a rare commodity. And when we think about, say, an immigrant community coming into Israel, you think, oh, I go to these classes, I meet these other immigrants, my family and the people they know, it tends to be a lot of other immigrants. So I'm just like everyone else. I'm not that unique. But there's a whole bunch of people you don't see, you don't interact with, who your community, your network is much less accessible. And now to your point, there's something important when networking that I refer to as weak connections. So when I think about my network and diversity in my network, I know a bunch of engineers. I know a bunch of MIT students. So when I go back to teach this year, or whenever I get back on campus and kind of can build some relationships, I'm going to meet another MIT person. And they're not going to add a lot of networking diversity because they're going to know lots of other people. There's going to be a high correlation between who they know and who I know. On the other hand, I met a minister a couple of years ago, and this minister doesn't know a lot of engineers, doesn't know a lot of people from MIT, but he knows a lot of clergy. probably some rabbis too from divinity school. And he knows lots of people who work in nonprofits and charities, and a whole bunch of people who I otherwise don't really come across to. Now, the value that he or I might have to each other initially is just however much we like each other. He's written an interesting book. I think he's an interesting guy. So we've kept in touch. But the great thing is his network expands in a way that was otherwise blocked off to me. And someone in his network might one day say, hey, I need a CTO, I need a technical person. And whereas if you ask that to one of my MIT friends, they're going to say, well, I know dozens. He's going to say, oh, wait, I know one. And that's going to make me much more active to his network down the road when that need comes up. So I think, focus on people in your community and get to know them, and they'll be closer. But don't forget to add some of that diversity.
Exactly. So you need one person from each small community to actually have access to that community. When you have good relationship with one person, and basically he can introduce you to his whole world of connection. So that's the weak ties of Granovator. It's a great fundamental in the whole sociological of network theory. So that's great.
Japan actually formalizes that. In Japan, they would have their young hires would early in their career go out for a couple days, and every company would just send out their young hires. They just go out and kind of meet each other, exchange cards, and get to know each other to build that network diversity early in their careers.
Wow, so cool, amazing. So what I was thinking is so that's your own power, your own circles. But then again, when you see a position and you don't realize you see a position that's online, let's say you would be in New York, and you see there in, I don't know, Google or in Microsoft, there's a good position, and you want to see if someone, who could make you who could help you get a kind of like a push inside there. So again, you didn't plant the seeds before, you don't have those connections. And then of course it would be better if you really had, before this opportunity arose, you would have created some relationship in that company. But how would you then reach out to someone inside there? Let's say I'm a junior software engineer, and I really see a position. Would you then reach out to someone if you can't find anyone in your close network? How would you do it, and what do you think is the principles to remember?
If you can, see if you can find someone in your extended network. And this is where social networking tools can be useful, because traditionally, before we had all this, I'd think, okay, who do I know who works at this company? And what I might not know is maybe your wife works at this company. I had no idea. I hadn't met her. But now through social networking, if you go to a tool such as LinkedIn, I can see, oh, there's a secondary connection. I know someone who knows someone at the company. And now I might never have met your wife, but if I have enough relationship with you to say, hey, listen, I'm interested in this, right? I pass my resume to you. You obviously have a close relationship with your wife, or let's say it's your friend. We can chain that trust, right? That person has never met me, but they know you. And you say, hey, listen, Mark, he's a good guy. You should, it's worth looking at his resume, right? We're not at the $10,000, but we're at the, I think it's worth your time to review this. And so you trust me, and this person trusts you, and we build that chain of trust to get there. So it's okay if you don't have someone direct, you can use that chain. And this is where having a larger network and more diverse network just expands your overall reach, because it's not just who you know, again, it's who they know and how far that can go.
Friends of your friends. Yeah, that's amazing. So, and what in that case, let's say you get to that point where they don't have it, where you see that even in your second line connections, degrees of connections, you don't have it. And now you have to really reach out and start with someone. I'm sorry, I'm pushing you. I'm pushing a little bit over the edge here.
That's fine. We always want to make it harder and harder. So there's a couple things you can do. Obviously, you can just do a cold outreach.
Yeah.
It's not great, but we can do better than that. So one is you can try to relate to this person when you reach out. The internet is great for learning someone's background, You can find their professional profile on LinkedIn. You can find things on social media, maybe what they're tweeting, maybe things they've written. And so you can find maybe something you have in common, right? And it might be, especially if you're an immigrant, maybe they come from the same area as you, and you say, we have that in common. I tell my students, when they reach out to someone, reach out to alumni, go to the alumni network, because every alum remembers what it was like to be that student saying, what am I going to do? Say, hi, look, I'm a sophomore, I'm an undergrad, and I really want to learn more about your company. Like, I can relate to that. And so if you can find something in common, where you grew up, maybe some hobby you have in common, something you can say, hey, we have this in common, and I'm interested in your company. And now they can see themselves in your shoes and you become more relatable. What you can do even beyond that, as you're doing your online stalking and learning their background, can you figure out where they might be? Is there a particular event that they're going to? Is there somewhere they might be? And can you find a way to run into this person? And then you can get to know them face to face, even if it's only for a few minutes. Still, that now makes you, again, more concrete, more real than just here's another random email with a resume.
That's a great point. It's a great idea. So basically, if you're on AE Pi, we don't have these fraternities, but let's say AE Pi or Alma, whatever they're called. So that's a great common denominator, that you are from that, or you're from the same city, or you're from this something. So find someone in that company who has something somewhere in common, whether it's city, fraternity, or other kind of organization, or other kind of common interest, or sport even. So that's as warm as you can. You can try and warm it a little bit more. That's a great advice. So what I want to change a little bit to technologies. I know, because in terms of like, how do you yourself manage your network today? Like, do you use LinkedIn as a technology? Do you have other type of technology? There's apps that gives them a little bit more intelligence than that's Contact Plus, for instance. There's all kinds of things. Do you have a specific management system that you help yourself nurture your network when you?
Sure. I tend to be something of a Luddite, which is someone who's anti-technology. Okay. I'm a bit of a Luddite when it comes to this type of tool. I certainly use LinkedIn. LinkedIn is my kind of active list of people I know and are connected to. And that's great, as just that replaces the Rolodex. That's where I can just go, I can find someone's information, contact information. Beyond that, I don't use a lot of high-tech tools. Now, both LinkedIn and Facebook are useful for passively keeping up with people. Reminders of it's someone's birthday, someone got promoted. That's something that's hard to keep track of, and you don't have to actively do it. You look at your feed, and it's a great tool in that sense. In terms of additional information, I do sometimes keep notes, but that's just in a really plain file. There's nothing fancy. I don't use tools. And so now the question is, why do I keep notes? It's helpful for remembering something about someone. If someone has a particular food preference, knowing that someone keeps kosher, for example, is important, because if you say, let's meet for coffee or let's go out for lunch, you want to suggest a place they're comfortable with. And you don't want to, let's go get some pork shoe loin at this Chinese restaurant if they're keeping kosher. So it's important to know these things about people, or knowing, for example, they have kids. Keith Ferrazzi talks about health, wealth, and children. I'd say health, wealth, and family. It's beyond just children. Well, knowing that they have children, and those children might be going off to college, or that they have someone with certain interests, that helps you relate and connect to them. So keeping a couple notes, I think, is helpful, but just a plain text file is fine for me. Others do prefer more advanced tools.
Cool. So how often do you have a priority? Like, let's say you take the example of Keith, right? So he has this relationship action plan where he basically prioritizes his relations in many ways. Do you go that systematically, or is it too systematic in that sense? It sounds a little bit cynical, but it's not really.
Right. That's an interesting question, right? People often ask, like, how much of networking is Machiavellian of, I want to get to know you because I can get something from you. I think it comes down to philosophy. I think as long as you are sincere in building that relationship, whatever tools you use to do it, because he has, I think, tens of thousands of people in his network. I can't remember 10,000 names. So I think if you're using tools, but to a sincere end, it's fine. I don't follow his, here's the plan and algorithm. I do, for example, actively make sure I wish everyone a happy birthday. Again, that's easy to track because my social media tells me who. That means at least once a year, I am going to reach out to you. We're not going to go more than a year without some connection. And so when I'm reaching out, I'm also going to just look at your social media, see what you've been doing, what's going on in your life. So I can always reconnect that way. Certainly I'll get other reasons why I might want to reach out, not just because I need something from you. If, for example, I remember that you have a son who plays the oboe and I see some article on oboe players, I'm like, oh, you know what? You're going to like this, or your son might like to read it. And that gives me reason to reach out and say, oh, I was reading this interesting article and thinking of you, or your son might want to see this. And so I'll do it more organically.
Amazing. Great, Mark. We actually, it feels like we haven't talked for a long time, but we passed the 1.5 hour, and I usually try to cut it down to half an hour. But I'll give you the last word or the last thought you have on networking. If you want to end this podcast with the last thought.
Sure. Networking is one of those skills that add so much value to your career. They're going to open doors as you look for a new job, but then later as you hire employees, as you look for customers, look for partners, as you look to help your children get into college or gain access to something. Networking helps in so many ways, and it is low cost. You don't have to take all these classes. You don't have to go and spend lots of money. It's just about building friendships and relationships, which is something you can do. So fantastic ROI. I very much recommend spending time listening to podcasts like this one. You can buy books. So mine is out, The Career Toolkit. If you don't want to read mine, read Keith Ferrazzi's wonderful book. Read Harvey Mackey's. He's got some great books. Read something on networking, because the few hours you spend, if that can shift your mindset, then suddenly you become so much more effective and you see so many more opportunities to network. That's going to add so much value to your life and to your career.
Amazing. And your book can be ordered where? Through your website or through the link through Amazon, or?
It's on Amazon, Barnes and Nobles. I have to check. I don't know if it's available internationally on those sites, but if you go to my website and go to the buy button, you can order directly through Pathway Books. They'll ship internationally. And then those in the US and Canada can order directly through other sites as well.
Amazing. Okay. And your website is?
thecareertoolkitbook.com. So just all one word, thecareertoolkitbook.com.
Amazing. Thanks for the podcast. Thanks for your time today, Mark. And enjoy your day in New York. What can I say?
Thank you so much for having me on. This has been wonderful.
You're welcome. I'm just going to